Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again to continue the lecture from the last time. I hope everybody has had a good New Year and a Christmas break, even though we are, most of you, I guess, also as us here in Berlin in lockdown. I hope you have a very good time and a little break in this last 2 weeks. I will then do a short review of our last lecture. So as already explained last week, we have in this next course and the previous, we have the objective to understand have an overview of historical development of the environmental policy agenda at global level, some of the global challenges, and also dive in and then in concepts that help to integrate different social actors and the development of environmental policies. This is exactly what we will focus today, is the social learning, is the community-based research, and how we get the knowledge of other stakeholders in the development of environmental policies, of community level strategies regarding climate change, regarding our food security. I will present some cases to you, but first, to go to the practical case and what we are doing on the ground, we will have a look on key concepts that you have a strong theoretical background if you go and work with it. I also wanted to highlight that we will look as concrete case with methodologies, and this might be helpful for you in your master thesis. So we will define what kind of interviews exist, what kind of methods you use to apply them, when you use this, and I think it's important if you are thinking about to use this for your master thesis, it will might be important that you have a great attention on it. I think there is something on chat. I don't know. Are you seeing the slides? No?
No, we're actually only seeing your browser.
Okay, so let's go again to the sharing. Thanks for telling me. Here. I'm doing the.
Yeah, now we can see them.
You can see? Okay, great. So let's do them. Okay, so here we just put telling you a little bit of how the objectives are organized, what I already mentioned. And today we will focus on the part 2, 3, and 4, and hopefully we will have time to do an exercise. Do you have some examples of environmental policies from your own country or other countries that you wanted to share? We had talked a little bit about this at the end of the last lecture as a exercise, as a free exercise, so you don't need to present this, but it's important that you have some example in mind, because for the exercise we can use this. You want to share some of examples of your country, of other countries, other policies that you find interesting?
I can share one, I guess.
Thank you.
The one that I always think about is UNICLOS, so like United Nations. I don't know exactly what the letters stand for, but it's like the Convention for the Law of the Seas, right? So it like basically explains that like certain countries, like every country which has like a coastline has like 20 nautical miles, I think, which is like their territory, and then beyond that, it's kind of like open sea basically. So it's it's like a law that kind of explains like what countries can do with their like coastline and what they can't, and like where the border is, etc. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think it will be very useful if you want to then to use this for the exercise and see which kind of stakeholders are involved in this kind of policy. For example, if you want to change something on this kind of policy, which kind of stakeholders you need to address and how to address them. I see the chat again.
I just wrote it in the chat.
Very good.
Like the letters in case someone wanted to like look it up.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I also wanted to mention that because there was an interesting discussion about colonization and global agreements in the last lecture. So if you, I don't know if you have opportunity, but I upload on the Moodle then some text specifically about this, and we can discuss this further with the examples also in the exercise. I also put there some specific literature, just one chapter for the social learning knowledge that you could be a little bit more warm up for this lecture now. If you have opportunity, you're gonna find some of this now. If not, I really recommend that you read later, and if not, you can also go for other literature that I will indicate. Okay, so we then saw that, just to wrap up what we saw last time, we saw that we have a lot of global challenges. We have a look that the future also can be even more critical if we get increasing the population to the 9 billions. This will be put much more pressure in the current challenges that we have, like hunger and use of natural resources, so on. So it's also a future possibility to be even more harder to development of policies and even more necessary then. As well with the climate change scenarios, which we also see that they have different kind of scenarios. We are fighting for have a decrease of carbon emissions and stay at level of up to 2 degrees, but seems that this has been very challenging to be achieved according to the last 10 years average emission amounts. We saw that all these discussions about improve environmental, it's not come from the last decade. It's come from start more or less on the 70s, and with some key documents. So we develop in general at global level, at international level, we have some key documents and evolution of these key documents that start with the Agenda 21 with 4 sections, and had developed and improved to Millennium Declaration, where we have then 8 objectives, and again evolution in 2015, where we come with the Sustainable Development Goals. We have already 17 goals, and this is at all agreement at the global level with key institutions. It's grouped in different areas. Now it's already one step further in the development of the policy implementation and at the global agenda. We saw that there is other transnational agreements that are very important, like the Green Deal. We have a look on this more in deep, what is proposed and how it influenced the development of policy at the regional and local level, because here we have all the destination of fundings and financial resources to implement environmental policies, especially in the Green Deal regarding clean energy. We did a small exercise. We saw then all this change, as I said, from the global level to the indicators and instruments to apply on the ground. how policies can be implemented based in market-based instruments or no market-based instruments, if it's voluntarily market or command control regulations like law, for example. We saw then the policy cycle, which kind of policy arrangements to also let clear the terms here. What is a policy, a program, and a plan? They are very different, and it's important that you know this if you are talking about environmental policy. We did this exercise from home, and we start to talk about why policies fail. There is several factors, and it's also very contextual why policy failures. But what we will focus here is the social aspect, not only the economical aspect. Of course, policies can also fail because the budget was not well calculated, there is not the same resources to be implemented, and so on. But we focus here because of the focus on social learning, why policy fails when it comes to the social aspects. So normally it's when there is insufficient mutual coordination between the several stakeholders that are involved in the policy implementation, we have a high chance to failure. So that's why it's very important to understand that the problematics that are organized at the regional or national level have a different view when you go to local level or at community level, and where to the actors that has to implement this policy. So what is complicated in environmental problems is that this normally is very complex. So you have several different systems that are interconnected, and the definition of what exactly the problem is and the solutions has a lot of uncertainty, and even more with this, with the unexpected events, as for example last year with COVID. And so that's why it's so important to have this multi-actors dialogue to have a more effective implementation. This is very also explored in this text of social learning that you have in Moodle. And why social learning is considering and more a key action for environmental policy development. What social learning proposes, well, learning, you know the term. So what social learning proposes is that people need to understand better the system where they are involved in terms of environmental issues, to negotiate better which goals has to be reached by the implementation of the policy. So what is basically the social learning is centered is in this co-creation of knowledge, that stakeholders sitting together at different levels and they can negotiate their goals. It's also very correlated to governance, what we will see in the next lecture. So, to give you an overview of the term, the evolution of social learning is not a new term. It's actually, it was created around or established around the 50s, more from the education science. So if you Google social learning, you're gonna see that the father of social learning is Bandura. He had developed some of the studies with previous knowledge brought for SERS, but he established this term especially regarding how kids learn in schools. So this is the first school of social learning. So don't get confused if you put this on the Google. It seems like very linked to school education, school programs, and how we reproduce behavior in groups. So this first school of social learning is very much related to stimulus response learning theory, which is different what we use nowadays, social learning for sustainable development, which is more related to a constructivist approach. In this first time of development of the term, this was using how we can give a stimulus in group, and how individuals influence each other in reproducing this behavior, which can be very useful for policy implementations also with adults later on, but in this moment it was used in this context. In the 90s, the term was then start to be used more in organizations. So how adults in a company or in other kind of sets reproduce their development and how they are influenced by the interaction with the group. Here we start already have a mix of other schools, so social learning integrated with system thinking, social learning integrated with organizational learning and development, and here you start to have a differentiation of the term, of the original term, and it started to create a second school. So during the 2000s, more or less, we have that are more clear. This is the genealogy of the term, a more clear school that was settled, where then social learning is using in different disciplines, and it's very much linked to sustainable natural resource management. After that, in 2010, we had the creation of UNESCO Chair for Social Learning and Sustainable Development. And here, the main differentiation, what you see between these two schools, is that from the 90s forward, we have a much more constructivist approach from the social learning term, by understanding that people need to integrate and create this knowledge together to improve the environmental problems. So some benefits, when you integrate, of course, more people and their knowledge and their things, their perceptions, social representations, and mental models, terms that we will talk very soon, you enhance the relevance and the legitimacy of the policies and the strategies, programs, or plans that you are implementing. You improve the quality because they are not centered only in scientific knowledge, but also in local knowledge and other experience. And you also increase the base or the support for the implementation, because people feel not only more represented, but things that are being targeted are meaningful for them. So how we do it? That's quite challenging. As you see, it's being using social learning in environmental science. It's relatively new. We have more or less 30 years of this implementation, and there is a lot of studies, and every day you have plenty of articles that you can find about this, but you have very concrete cases. Some theoretical bases. I will bring here some of the bases that I consider crucial to understand what is the core of social learning to policy implementation, but there is several articles that use other theoretical bases too. So and also in my studies, that what I use, the constructivist paradigm is more or less a consensus for all the theoretical discussion, but which kind of articles and theory, which kind of authors and theories, it can be discussed. I particularly center in two authors that work with critical thinking. Critical thinking means that people has not only integrate their own knowledge, they can criticize the policy and influence in the development and implementation of this. When you talk about critical thinking, I reference here Paulo Freire. I don't know if you know about this author. He's a Brazilian author that work a lot with popular education and massive education, but center on the view of the actors that has to develop and has to be not only considered, but has to be empowered. This is from one side. From another side, I focus also on Habermas with the communicative actions, and those two theories are complementary. They're very deep, very much from the sociology and education science. So here I'm already touching the Fritz area. As I said, I'm always in between the environmental policy and environmental sociology. So if you have more questions about these two theories, they are, of course, they have schools, entire schools. Habermas Special of School of Frankfurt. So if you have questions about this, it's very much in deep theory here, and I can discuss with you parallelly also with Fritz if you prefer. So for both theories, these transformative actions, what we are expecting with implementation of environmental policies, they just can occur when we have a reflective and a collective learning. So people, they can decide their own strategies to implement. Even if you have a regional or more global level or national level of a policy, when you come to the implementation, this is an individual level, and this requires critical thinking and decision on it. So what is important when you want to do social learning process in the integration of, for the integration of different actors, is understand what are their motivational problems. So what are the key issues for the people that has to implement some policy, or how they also how their context they set, their life set can be impacted by the policy. So this is the first step, understanding what are the motivational problems of them, then understanding what are their mental schemes and how it could be changed. And this is, in the end, is a process of codification and decodification, which I will explain to you. Codification and decodification, they are very, they are terms that Paulo Freire also use, which is like which kind of codes people have to understand their reality and how they operate in their reality, and deconstruct this, which is decodification then, to see how the possibility of change is feasible, which is like also another term, the unknown feasible, that people think that it's always the same and the same path, but you have to decode this, deconstruct this mindset to then implement different strategies. If you want, I also can pass specifically knowledge about these three key points. But before, I would like to then that you also get again clear on the terms again. I think when you are talking about the development of policies, plans, programs or plan, you have to be very clear on the differentiation. Question I forgot to ask. Sorry, food security and climate change. Sorry. So again, to be clean in your handling your knowledge on terms. When you talk about social learning, you will talk about how people perceive the things, which kind of mental models, which kind of mental schemes people work with. That's why I think it's very important to understand the differentiation of things, also from the social frame, from to understand which kind of terms and things you are using and when you are using. I think as an expert, having a master degree and having done environmental policy and sociology course, you might be at least familiar with this kind of terms. Of course, for all these terms that I will bring here, for example, for perceptions, you have, if you study, I don't remember if we have psychologists in this court, we have in other cases, but for the perception school, for example, you can have entire courses only on perceptions, or only on how perceptions work, also at biophysical level. Because perceptions, now I go diving on the terms for you, perceptions are basic cognitive and individual process. They are crucial for us to understand our context, and they are straight connected in how effective the policy can be. But what we see is that perception is normally use it as a very general term. Everybody say about perceptions, everybody say also about collective perceptions, which for some authors is a contradiction, even though I agree that we can use this term, but for some authors, collective perception, for example, is something that you should not use, because perception is an individual process which is very much related with your own psychological and biological base. From perception, we are also linked to which kind of colors you see, if you feel warm or cold, for example. So it's a very individual process, and it's defined how you see the world, what you see and how you see. And so this public perception, what people perceive, can fundamentally promote or restrict policy implementations. We know this with very basic examples. For example, waste management, how you and your environment or in your house, how you handle the waste, for example, if you perceive as recycling or organic, how it smells and how you're gonna deal with it. So if you go from the very macro individual level until the macro policy environment, you see that all this is what is proposed as, for example, zero waste. When it comes from individual level, it's hardly or strongly in influence for how people perceive waste, for example. This can be a big debate. So what perceptions also are related to this, with this specific psychological barriers that we have when we go for policy implementations. And about the barriers, you see here on the corner, there is one very interesting article that I recommend. It calls the Dragons of Inactions, Psychological Barriers that Limit Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation. Is very interesting. There is 7 dragons that the author brings. We will use these dragons to see one study that I will present to you, one case specifically, and it's very interesting. You can go through it. So perceptions are individual human process, and of course talking about human perceptions here, because other animals also have perceptions. And the father of perceptions school here is Merleau-Ponty. He studied a lot how the sensory and the cognitive structure of perceptions work. Also very deep theory here. I will not go too much on it, but I feel that you might know the main authors if you want to go in deep on these schools. So the concept of perception is associated to judgments, segment memories, emotion and motivation, representation of the environment, and meanings of social structure reproduction. So that's how we communicate with the others. Summarizing then, perception is a basic cognitive process. It leads to individual behavior in the society. It's linked with your own personal experience, and it's of course related with your biophysical body. So it's also related to your physical and chemical stimulation of your sensory system. What we normally relate to perceptions when we want to say that it's not my perception, but it's a collective perception, or it's something about the society, or it's something about this community. When we go for this, we are more going for a social representation, which is this collective perception when people wanted to say. So social representation are also a key term that you should know. Also, if you want to go in this direction in your master thesis. And social representation is, the father of social representation here is Moscovici. Here you see the man. And he created the term of social representation to organize or to differentiate of individual perception. So social representation, then, it's a body of knowledge where we share with the others and the society. Here what we see is how we create the reality. We will see some examples as how the group deal with one concept and share between that. You don't need to every time explain what is a vegetable, for example. You have a body of knowledge where everybody agree, or that you see that this kind of food is healthy, for example. This is a social representation. This is a collective knowledge where we create together and share to communicate. So social representation is, of course, very much related to the culture and the society frame, also with the time that we are living. And for Moscovici, he said that this is a kind of knowledge of common sense, is a kind of social thought that all the society share. Even though nowadays, I think we can still keep all these considerations. I know that nowadays we had very interesting theories of conspiration and so on, and some of the collective knowledges are very much put in doubt. But in general, we have basic concepts that we share as a society. So this, of course, is a process that emerge of conditions and specific social sets. You also have social representations in different scales, social representations in your family, social representations in your community, social representations at regional level and national level and global level, the same. So as this, for example, social representation, what we see as at the link side, some people share as a production system, some people share as a forest, and some people share as ecosystem. For some people, this is only a production system, and the right side is then a forest or ecosystem. And this influences a lot how people perceive and how also they implement strategies related to deforestation. We will see this later on. The same for food. When we go for food security studies, which you see now, this is a personal experience when I was doing the studies in Tanzania, for example. At some point I was talking with a colleague and I was talking about food, and for me food was always here, and my colleagues in the village were talking about food only, talking about this center of the plate, which is ugali. I'm pretty sure that some of you know what ugali is, but this is a big portion of carbohydrate, and that's how they feel satisfied. How they feel satisfied when they have the big portion of, or the big part of the meal centered in ugali. So for them, when we are talking about food, I was talking about everything, and they were talking about food only about this portion here on the center. And I think this is very important to see that the micro level of implementation of policies is very different, and that's why it's so important to integrate the view of the people. It's very challenging, integrate the view of people, and there is a strategist for this that we will see now, but it's very important. Any question? So what is the basic difference of perceptions and social learnings? Is that perceptions are individual process. They are centered in your own psychological and biological body, and it involves a unique process of structurating and restructurated cognitive models. On the other hand, or also social learning, also social representation come in the same direction. So it's not on the other hand, but social learning is expression of a collective. It's not individual process. So it comes connected to certain groups. It's configured a set of meaning that we share as a society. I give already examples for you of some social representations, the difference of social representations in food, but to give again a concrete example, and also bring in here what mental model. You see also a lot of mental model if you study about social learning. As perception, it's how I see myself. So I see that I can see that it's green. Some people cannot see the same color, so I see that it's green. It's connected with my capacity, my biological capacity. I can remember that I ate as a child, and this is tasty or not. If it's a social representation, it's what I share with the other. For me, this is food, and my groups, my family or my community, this is food. And not for everybody, this is considered food. And mental model is already which kind of judgment you put in something. For example, that this is healthy, or this is not healthy, or this is not should not be eaten, and so on. So mental models also guide a lot our behavior in the society. Having said that, how we deal with all these issues, perceptions, social representations, how we get this, how we identify this, and how we integrate this in the implementation of the policy. So I will bring you some of our experience here about how we implemented this on the ground, how we studied, how people perceive the problems, the environmental problems, especially climate change. Also some problems related to food security, and I will show you then what methods we use, and we can do then an exercise where you implement your own study and understand how you can better capture the views and negotiate these different views of the other in the development of the policy and the understanding of the problem. So, practical case. I will try to present you 4. Most of the time we don't have time to 4, so I present 3 at least, some done in different countries. The first one was done in the south of Brazil. It's a region where suffer a lot with droughts and also like with all the extreme events regarding weather and climate. So it's this region. It's a rural area where the farmers suffer with not only the high dry seasons and heat waves, but also with heavy rain, and eventually, which is not common to Brazil, even a hurricane was done in this area. I will try to show you what they are developing there to do a better climate change adaptation. Let's see if I can get the video. Sometimes has some problem. It's old and self-made video. I hope you can see. Can you see there?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear too?
No.
No. Again, the audio.
Maybe there's a way to like share audio as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I just have to see how to share the audio.
Or you could just share the link and we all watch it ourselves.
Yeah, or that. So.
Okay, I will. Maybe now, let's just see if it's working then. If not, I share the. Is it working?
Yeah, it's
Good. Okay, you're gonna have a little bit fun also. It was done 10 years ago, but I think it still can show well the reality there, and especially the view of the farms. It's part of the Claris project. So here we go.
Oi, esse é o município de Guaraciaba, no estado de Santa Catarina, no sul do Brasil. Aqui nesse município, os agricultores estão fazendo uma estratégia muito interessante para a sua sobrevivência. Eles plantam para autoconsumo muitos produtos, basicamente tudo que eles consomem. E esses pequenos agricultores, além do mais, têm sementes adaptadas às condições climáticas que aqui nesse lugar são muito diversas. Aqui acontecem frequentemente secas, também acontecem chuvas intensas, em áreas de baixada acontecem alagamentos e, além do mais, ocorreu aqui um evento muito atípico para as condições brasileiras, que é um vendaval, um tornado, que destruiu muitas casas. Para vocês então que a gente tem um trabalho forte com sementes crioulas, né? A gente trabalha bastante com as famílias, a questão do resgate das sementes crioulas, né? Um trabalho que envolve bastante todas as famílias aqui do município de Guaraciaba.
A semente crioula tem uma importância muito grande para a população do mundo inteiro. Ela é base para a formação de novas variedades, variedades melhoradas, e ela tem uma importância direta na alimentação das famílias que dependem da semente crioula para plantar a sua horta e para plantar a sua lavoura. E ultimamente a gente observou que até em função do clima, de algumas secas, tem se perdido variedades de arroz aqui na região. Nessa questão do clima a gente ainda não sabe o que vai acontecer, mas esse fato já tem ocorrido essa perda de variedades.
Em Guaraciaba também houve um evento atípico, né, o tornado, que também dificultou um pouco a questão das sementes, né, muitas famílias perderam algumas variedades importantes de sementes, né, mas que aos poucos estão sendo reavivadas, né, buscando outras famílias, em outros municípios. Semente de 1 quilo?
De 1 quilo a gente já colheu.
Nossa!
E a calda que a gente faz é com o próprio tomate. Sabe o veneno para ele? A gente diz veneno, mas não é. A gente faz com o próprio tomate. Quando ele chega a uma altura assim, o pé, A gente corta, porque daí o coração de boi quase sempre ele vem um monte, né, debaixo assim, broto, faz bastante broto. Corta um punhado daquele broto e amassa ele, joga num vidro com álcool e um pouco de, o que tu bota dentro, sabão, e uma folhinha de fumo tu botou, mas não precisa botar aquilo lá se não quer. Só com o próprio tomate, a folha do tomate, o sabão e o álcool, aí tu deixa uns 15 dias assim. Ele vai virar uma calda verde.
Fechar bem o vidro.
Fecha o vidro, porque o álcool evapora. Vai virar uma calda verde. Aquela calda tu pega um tanto assim, num agregador de água. E aí, depois de cada chuva, tu dá uma chuviscada por cima.
Mas não mata os tomates?
Não mata o tomate, não tem um tomate bichado. E não é tóxico, né?
Como é que vocês descobriram isso? Vocês que bolaram isso?
Eu não lembro disso ali, se alguém disse pra nós o quê.
Não, fiquei sabendo isso já. Foi uma reunião, não sei
Porque
onde,
assim como na
isso.
Ipagre, de uma vez tinha as extensionistas que falavam que na horta tu pode matar os bichinhos da horta com a própria hortaliça, então se funciona com outras coisas, como com o tomate também funciona. E aí pra cebola a gente faz com a própria cebola, que dá aquelas coisinhas pretas na cebola. Aqueles piolhos.
Já vi,
Tu pega um maço de cebola, deixa no álcool, depois tu chuvisca com aquela, na água, com aquilo lá, mata tudo, com a própria cebola.
Olha!
O tomate, o próprio tomate também
Mas
funciona.
tudo calda. Você vai fazer com a mesma planta.
Sim.
Não.
E aí nós distribuímos, né, Adriana, para quantas famílias? No meio semente, quanto, Adriana, nós fizemos 1 quilo? Não era meio quilo.
Foi feito plantado, né, aqui com as variedades, vai para ser 80 variedades, né, daí não vai dar as 80, não, umas 60 ele falou, né, perto das 60 variedades que tem. Aqui daí foi feito 8
Porque tem alguma que pode ser parecida, né, geneticamente.
Então aí, daí foi arrancado aquele dia, né, para ver qual é que é melhor, qual é que não é tão boa, ou...
Tivemos uma área de campo, né? Foi arrancado 3 pés, 3 plantas de cada variedade. Cada linha é uma variedade diferente.
Aí vocês vão vendo qual que é a melhor variedade por casa também, um pouco de experimento, é isso? Cada variedade.
E aqui a gente avalia a diversidade, né?
Uhum.
As diferenças de uma variedade é diferente.
Claro, né? Os insetos, a doença, tudo ver, né?
A cor dela, né?
Tudo, né?
E é uma planta nativa do Brasil, né? Então é interessante trabalhar com ela.
Uma planta nativa do Brasil, dá bem aqui? Dá.
É uma planta que produz em qualquer solo. É um armazém natural, ela está ali guardadinha. Ali,
fica aí no chão, pode deixar 2, 3 anos.
Está na geladeira, né?
Uhum.
Você arrancou algum pé? Você arrancou algum pé?
Não.
Vamos arrancar um para ver?
Ah, oba, gostei.
Vamos pegar um aqui. Com calma, tá?
Aham. Ótimo.
Vamos arrancar uma branquinha aqui, ó.
Tudo gosta, tudo. É uma planta que tudo animal, igual essa galinha aqui,
E ó,
o bicho qualquer come.
Olha que
olha aqui, ó.
foi.
Aqui nós já temos duas variedades, ó.
Uma que é branca, né? E outra que é escura.
Diversidade, né?
Ó,
Aham.
essa aqui tem a casquinha roxa, isso é bem raro.
Eu tava falando que pra mim aqui todos os animais gostam de trato, né? É bem útil também. É, eu sei pra tudo.
Tanto pra casa como pros animais ela é útil.
Tanto que esse aqui foi arrancado aqui, não venceu comer, então pra funda. Pra tudo aqui. Aqui dá muito forte a geada, né?
Ah, então ela é bem resistente pra quando dá geada, então.
Ah, tem que guardar, mas senão deixou
Esse aqui, ó.
Tá.
Não morre, ó.
Esse não,
Tá.
esse dentro do chão agora ele brota de novo. Agora ele brota de novo, né? Ele vai dar o pé igual aquele dentro. É difícil ajudar muito.
A mandioca não dá bola aqui.
Porque ela gosta, inclusive, da terra mais seca, né? Como ela já não gosta da umidade, ela resiste bem.
Uhum.
Até.
Okay. Here we back. Hey. So, any question? This video is a little bit to show you, to break first of all. Is everybody hearing? It's all fine?
Yes, but we can't see the slides again. If that's
Okay, so here we go. Now?
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, this was, as I said, an amateur video done some years ago, but was also the idea to break a little bit the theoretical session and bring you some image of the case that we will see now. I have a question here. Good. So I don't know how much familiar you are with also the rural communities and developing countries, which can be a very different context and a different reality. I think the video bring you a little bit those images and real people talking about their environmental problem, how they solve it, how much protagonists they can be, and which kind of strategies they develop as a local level, and how also what are the missing environmental policies here. I think that this is a very concrete case also of missing environmental policies and things that we will see in the discussions of the studies. Do you have some comments? You have some questions? You want to bring some experience that you have of studies on the ground? Okay.
I
So,
can say something for sure.
please.
I have a question about the yeah, like, because I mean, I feel like the interviewer person was asking like some questions, but I was wondering like like if you had to just summarize in like a couple of sentences what the overarching like goal of the study was, you know, because like I feel like it was kind of like the questions were like disconnected from each other a little bit, and they're about different things, and I'm sure we didn't get like all the information.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all. Yeah, so it was like, just maybe you could like just give us a couple more, because I saw that you produced the video, right? Or you produced it was your work, so you probably know more about it.
Yes, yes. Actually, now I will explain the study behind. The video was just bring some image and some questions about the reality, but there is a structured study behind with specific questions and questionnaires, which was not shown on the video. The video is more like free, also because this is one of the issues of implementing methodology, is that normally if you record or if you record or make a videos, both are record, the questionnaire in the time that you are doing specific questions that you have in your structured study is a different kind of integration. So you see here that there is different methods, and the video, it's one method, but what I will present is structured interviews that we did, like questionnaires and semi-structured interviews. What the video do, what you see there, it's informal interviews. So some questions where you try to capture a little bit of also of the social context. It's a different method, the video. I will explain what we use specifically for the study, which is published now.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Good. Thank you for the question. So this Guaraciaba and Anchieta is the same region, the same municipalities. And then what we wanted to understand, so what was the climate perceptions and how it is influenced in development of the strategies that they do locally. The products that they showed here, for example, in the video, they get very well known now at academic level, and there is a lot of genetic studies about the potential of those local varieties to better climate adaptation. And this time of where the video was done, it was still the middle process of all this discovering, but now you can find many articles also from genetics telling about the potential of those seeds. So there, in that moment, what we want to do also with more this focus on the social structure behind this implementation and their perception. So research context was this singular development of a strategy at local level and the possibility of have a better seeds for climate adaptation that could be then supported by national or regional environmental policies. So the structure of the study. So we had the research design done based on semi-structured interviews. You see exactly what semi-structured interviews later on, but just to be short here, semi-structured interviews is when you have specific questions, but with an open end. So what people can answer what they want. They don't have an ABC, for example, which is a structured interview. Here's a semi-structured interviews where you have a clear guide with the same questions for all the people that you interview. It's the same questions. It's not freely asked as you saw in the video. And we developed these questions based in indicators and 4 indicators. You see ABC, which is questions related to the belief in climate change, if they believe or not. And then secondly, if they perceive the consequences of the climate change in their life, how they perceive the impacts, and for positive or negative. If they perceive that they have a role in climate change or in the weather conditions in general, and how they believe or how they evaluate the potential of adaptation strategies. So here we had here the only structured, not the semi-structured part was D. So D, they have to decide yes or no for closed-end questions. We have also a very specific article published about this case. If you want, you can also have here access on the further reading indication. So here was the same first frame. So we designed a questionnaire with open-end questions, which I will show you also some examples of questionnaires later on. And here so was mixed. You have semi-structured interviews and a final part which is more structured, where they have to decide based, and they don't have option to propose or to talk about. They have to decide based on what the interviewer is asking and giving as an give answer. So the second case was also in Brazil. Then here we have much more complex study because it's related to trying to cover the entire area of Brazil. So based on the 4 biomes that exist in Brazil, rainforest, Amazonian forest, semi-arid, when having, and also it's not here. Here we have also the savannas, which is called Cerrado in Brazil. And there in each of these areas, we did the same structure of research and implement in the region. So how the structure of the research was done here. We have a research design based on 4 steps. So first we identified what are the local, the social actors, or the stakeholders, or the local actors that are present in the communities, for example, local governments or institutes or NGOs or community associations, for example, and which programs they have regarding climate adaptation strategies. So this was the first view. So this was calling the institutions, going to local meetings to try to identify which kind of organizations they have to implement adaptation strategies. Then we have a configuration of focal groups with people of the community. So we have here focus group as another method, which I will also explain later on when we use focus group, which is more this collective discussions. Then we have semi-structured interviews with, for example, key actors of the community, which were the key actors were identified in step 1. And then we finally have standard questionnaires, which is structured interviews, and based to talk with the families that live in the most vulnerable places regarding weather events here. I will present just not the 4 cases because it's the 4 areas, but the case is specifically done in the south of Brazil, in an area which is a very vulnerable area, and they have their extreme problems with heavy rain and flood. The case was here structured in 5 key questions, and these 5 questions, they compound the questionnaire or the interview questions. So first is adapted to what? So what they perceive as events that are threatening them, who will be affected if they feel that they are affected in their environmental and their socioeconomic conditions or specific group risks, how, what it will be affected, then in terms of which areas, not only people, but which areas of the community or the city will be more affected, and how they can adapt. So here we are trying to identify with him measures to reduce their vulnerability or to do a better risk management at local level. And finally, how to adequate adaptation proposals. So here they give instructions how they think that at policy level they can be supported. what we find as a result, just to give you a short overview of in those two studies and how different can be really the mental models and the social representations. In the case one, that you see the video, for example, where we implement the semi-structured interviews and the final part with the adaptation stretch questionnaire, you see that this is one way to present the results. We also talk about treatment of results and methodologies. You see that we have asked a lot about community vulnerability in these 4 steps, ABC, and the impact of climate. And here they relate their problems directly to climate. This is where they develop their own strategy. So they connect that the climate brings more drought and more high heat, and this high heat has a consequence, more disease and less production, so also less income. And the high heat and also heavy rains influence again on drought and the water problems. This is how they connect these key points about climate change. This is done with, can be done also with software called MaxQDA, which we also see and specifically when we talk about methods to treat the results. And the second case in this region where they suffer, in the south of Brazil, where they suffer with heavy rains and flood, for example, when you ask about climate impact, which kind of impacts climate has in their life, you see they don't relate it to community problems, either heavy rains. They say that this had no impact on him and had not changed in the last 10 years, which were the question that we have. Instead, they say that the community vulnerability is related to the lack of infrastructure, which is generate flood. Then it's not about the quantity of rain that they have and how much it has increased or not in the last year, but it's just only a problem of infrastructure. So its infrastructure is also has been changed a lot because it increased a lot the population. And this is an island in the south of Brazil, so the population has increased a lot, and this just had like make the infrastructure not enough, and the income has going down because of the economical problems, and this generate also a problem with the food security that they have there. So what we see here is that for implementation of environmental policies that related with climate in this community tend to fail directly because it's not a motivational problem for them. This is the structure that I showed you before. So here you see the comparison where there's no link about their own motivations and their own context to implementation of the product. In this study here, we did exactly as already a pre-study before the development of the policy for climate change. When we see bringing the literature that I showed you before about the 7 dragons of inaction, when you see the results, you can clearly link them with what people said about having, for example, no actions for climate change, for example, which is one of the environmental issues that mostly targeted by environmental policies. You see that, for example, one dragon of inaction is the limited cognition, and so here you have things, but for example, uncertainty is one of uncertainty is one of the links, and for example, the second case of that I present here is clearly linked with this perceived behavior control. So for them, it's only a question of infrastructure, how they develop this, how they are supported to do this, and it's not related to the uncertainty or the heavy events where you normally don't have control as the other weather events is normally. And so on, we have other dragons of inaction that I wanted to mention here, which limit cognitions, then the ideologies. Of course, we have also in the first case a family that said that all the events, even though they perceive that the climate change, this is a punishment of God, and they cannot do anything. This is the family that were not doing adaptation strategies. We have different groups also to compare in the first case. So we have also comparison with others that for example, this is work a lot with country levels when we have those negotiations that some of the developing countries said the developed countries already did their pollution portion, and now we have to pay the price and do clean, and it will be a problem for our development. So you have this comparison with other in terms of social comparison networks and perceived inequality. You have then some costs, for example, if it's a problem how people can use the moment now, for example, for their development, and it doesn't help later on if they can have the opportunity. So this is also this momentum behavior that has to be done now because of immediately gain. Discrepancy, of course, there is a lot of mistrust in the information, especially nowadays with like some movements against science, which many times is because science has to be expressing that the things can be considered in a different way too. Then people consider this as a mistrust that is not accurate, because for the normal publicum the things has to be yes or no, and for science the doubt has to be there. Yeah, so we have perceived risks. You perceive risks very different if it's a financial risk, or if it's physical, if it's social, if it's psychological, temporal, functional, related to just specific groups, and limited behavior. I really recommend it if you're going to do any study of perceptions and how people are developing or not strategies, you locate in the drivers of inaction. Also, this author has this article as one of the key ones, but he has several. It's Gifford, and Gifford has an entire school of why people tend to accept or not environmental policies or environmental behavior. This is a key author for you. So the third case, I will come back if we have time, but we work with hypotheses. This was done in Argentina and France. Parallelly, we work then here not with the same structure that you see before. There is different structures, right? Here is a structure very much related to hypotheses. We work directly with big wine producers in Argentina, in Mendoza, the area where mainly wine is produced, and in France also, and in Bordeaux. So here what we do is that we have like 4 hypotheses, and we go with structured interviews. It means that we ask yes or no, or several other possibilities, but close and directly with the producers of wine. I will back with this later on if we have more time. The third case, and the longest one, because this was really designed to capture in deep the reality and the context what people were living, was done in Tanzania, was very focused on a qualitative approach. And here the idea was to understand what are the community drivers of food security strategies development. Here you see in more details, we do then workshops. You see it's already a different kind of methods. It was not semi-structured interviews, not structured interviews, not informal interviews. It was workshops, focus groups. And these focus groups were done in 4 cases in 2 regions of Tanzania. We developed there 16 workshops, was 4 per village, also with different categories. This is another important issue of studies, that you have diversity in your sample, not just representativeness in terms of number, but also in terms of diversity of actors. And in total, we work with 207 people, and those very remote villages in Tanzania. They are rural villages as the other cases, but very remote. We record, have 16 videos also to analyze, and we produce 72 mental maps regarding the problems that they describe, and we pre-organize the organization of the workshops. And we also work with them what are the local solutions for them. So here is the structure of this workshop. There was the research was very focused on the design of a pedagogical structure that can give freedom to people express their own problem and then create their own strategy. So the first phase was centered in the community knowledge recognition. So see what they, the characterization that they do of themselves, of what they want, what they like to eat, what they like to do as a main activities in the community, where we recognize what they have as a knowledge of what they have as a social structure. Sorry. Then the second phase was more focused on the objective of the research, which will understand why the communities are food insecurity in their own view, and then to pass for how the things can be changed. So here we look, we focus on understanding current food insecurity. Here they understand and explain their own problems through a pedagogical structure which was created based in Paulo Freire, which I also said before. So here we work with the theory of oppressor. I don't know if you also know about this methodology. It's have you, any one of you, heard about it? Because otherwise I can stop to explain this specific the method. It's used not for research only. It's used for several projects regarding also to how people can describe their own solutions and their own problems. So, okay, so I will explain the tier of oppressor. They can also criticize their own situation and visualize how they live this situation. So here, the third is they then explain what could be a solution for this problem that is done by the theater. So I will tell you quickly about the theater of oppressor. Here it was based on in Paulo Freire principles. Augusto Boal, another author, create a structure of theater where the publicum, or the community in this case here, describe and make a scene of their own problems. For example, as you see here on the scenes, right here, we say theater of oppressor. Here, for example, here's one of the essays that they are doing. After step 1 and 2, where we discuss about the community in general, we ask to them to represent hunger, how they live hunger in the community. So they here are showing like how the neighbors come to help, like a woman is dying, and so on. So this is their ascent, but the principle of the theater of oppressor is that in some point we stop the ascent, and the people, the second group, which is watching the ascent, which is also part of the community, can start to propose solutions, and you start to collect those solutions. What is interesting here is that you bring a lot of content about what is important and why they are living in this situation, a part of the solutions that they create. I will show you some of the unexpected results that you can collect because of this kind of method. So here they are rehearsal the scene that they will do. It's also, you can show, there was in this categories we have the mixed group where we have men, women, and children, and we have also they working isolated, just men, to see if there is gender issues or just women the same, and the children also because of the then representing different diversity and age. So here they are also part of the scene. You see also people have a lot of fun, and this is also another channel of communication that is very important to considering when you are implementing, of course, strategies that people are open for here what you have, but also when you implement the research. So we tend to be much more communicative if we are with an open channel for what is happening here, and the scenes and the theater helped on this way. Here they are showing the conflict with the Maasai tribe, which has a huge impact on food insecurity, and I will explain why later. Was also one unexpected result. Here also the conflict with Maasai. I'm sorry. Here they are fighting on the water line. Because this is related to the water problem, that for the women the main problem is not have no water, is the fights that happen on the water line to capture line where they collect water. I think you already saw many of those images of women bringing big bowls of water that they collected in a collective center of water. And here you see the conflict with Maasai. So what we discover in these different cases and different villages where we did this study is that the main community constraint, which is the motivational problem for them, can be very different, even though the conditions are similar. Especially on the dry region, where is here, Dodoma region is the dry area, and Kilosa is the area where is semi-humid. So here the environmental conditions are very different. I'm sorry, I don't see this. The methods that the theater of oppressor, I think, is that what you say? The authors. So okay, so we also can later on have more discussions on the theater of oppressor as a complementary method also. So what we see here was this difference of views, why they have food insecurity and those local, and they also say that as a main recurrent solution, which was integrated on the research implementation on this technological packet that was implemented in this local village for help with food security, was based also on what they see. A couple of things were not integrated. This is one of the limitations of those process that we also can discuss. There is several limitations when you try to integrate different knowledge, because to balance how all these views can be integrated is one of the challenge. But without this, we have much more failure on the policies. So here we see that the local solutions are also very different. Sometimes they're very innovative. Sometimes they are also not related with you have expect as a researcher. For example, they ask more also, because of the theater, they ask also more strategies that can help the community communication, for example, that they can be better integrated. And normally in the projects, especially the agronomic ones, also because of our expertise, of course, we focus on the technical solutions, and there is also soft solutions that can be trying to be developed parallelly, so the technical solutions can be better implemented. I must say before to go to more details of the results that this research was done under the frame of the Ministry of Food Security and Nutrition, a German ministry, Agriculture and Nutrition Security, and Ernährungssicherheit, so it's more like nutrition security of Germany, and they cooperate then with local institutions, not only NGOs, but also the university, the Sokoine University in Tanzania. So it's a very integrated project, but also the research is done based on those conditions. It's not that we just go there, of course, and capture all this information. I was personally doing this, but with an entire team of local people. And that's how you see that this budget of this big policy frame go to the ground. So this, from those millions of the Green Deal, for example, that I show you in the first lecture, you see that the transform and implementation at that level, especially if you're talking with cooperation with other countries. So here, what you see is the contextual factors of food insecurity, for example. This is also part of one publication. You can read more details, but the food insecurity in those places are related mainly with 5 drivers, which is land, water, disease, income, and conflicts. And depend of the region, this is for the semi-arid region, the Doma, as you see. The main constraint or the main motor for programs or implementations is strategies that are related to land and water. So, for example, here, what you see is that this nutritional status was also part of this research, but in the big frame of the project, not of the theater professor in these workshops. But before this was done, there was a massive survey with 600 people where they collect blood sample and anthropometric measures to detect then what are the nutritional status, and the results point a low vitamin A, low iron, low zinc, and stunting in this region. And the contextual factors for this is say they have a low production because of water scarcity, which is very deductible from the beginning if it's a semi-arid area. But they also perceive, for example, vegetables as not real food. They have a problem with alcoholism, which comes from all the categories, but it's also very interesting how the children describe the alcoholism at home. So this is also influenced a lot on the nutritional status and domestic violence. There is also one publication for this results specifically regarding gender issues here. And for the humid, semi-humid region here, what you see as a contextual factor is also very interesting. They have basically the same problem, even though here they also have overweight, which is this hidden hunger, which is contextual factors here is that, for example, having low iron, one of the strategies if you propose as a project, for example, is increase the intake of meat or green leaves or eggs. Those are all sources of iron. But in this case, let's see how the riches are the contextual factors. They avoid milk and meat because come from the Maasai, and the agricultures say that the Maasai came with the cattle. I think you know the Maasai, they're the stereotype of the tribes. They're very colorful with this black, red and black clothes, and they bring their cattle around several territories. And one of the problems is that they pass where the farmers are producing with the animals and destroy their plantations. So they have a huge conflict with them, and they avoid meat because come from Maasai and this village where we study. They also perceive vegetables as a non-real food, or more like a children food, and they sell the eggs to buy water. So this is a kind of cash. And also the alcoholism was also one we should perceive. And that's the richness of complementary methods. You can have the anthropometric measures and the questionnaires about food intake, which is highly quantitative, and you can get a very precious information on it. But why the situation is like this, you mostly take better with qualitative methods, which is like this that I present. Questions? So I will do then a small break, because now we will talk just about the methods. We saw the cases here. So we do a 20 minutes break, and I will come back with explaining the methods that you saw here with examples more in details, when use them, and then we will do exercise where you decide the methods that you want for specific research regarding one environmental policy implementation. Is it fine?
Yeah, sounds good.
Good. Okay. So if there is no question, then now it's 5:30. So 12:25, we see each other here again. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay. Is everybody back? Then we can continue to the final part. Any question? Okay. Any comments? Okay. I think it's already recording.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I think it's really interesting, like all the research you've done. And I was just wondering, like, how long did it take one of those projects at a time?
Yeah, the first project where you saw the video was it's a very interesting question. Thank you, because I can explain more a little bit the frame around the studies. Is it recording, right? Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. Yeah. So the first project is this Claris LPB, and LPB is because La Plata Basin is on the south of South America. Is one of the biggest basin in the world. It's have five countries around of this network of rivers. What the basin is, and this project was 5 years. And this project was 5 years, and there was several work packages. So this study was in one of the 8 work packages. For example, those was all about the adaptation of this area to climate change. So, for example, the first work package was only about coordination, because we have 20 institutions from 8 different countries. Just to give you this overview, this was 8 million euros that comes from the European Commission, one of the programs that they have to support climate change adaptations, for example. So this was the framework 7 from the European Commission for climate change, like financial resources from climate change. So the consortium is organized around these 20 institutions, 8 countries, and with 3 key objectives, which was determine also scenarios from the future. So for this was work package 2 and 3, and then also hydrological effects and impacts. And so there was like different. I was on the WP8 that was coordinated by Stefan, by the way, and this was specifically about the detect adaptation strategies for the rural sector. And that's why the overall objective where this research was done was identify different kind of strategies, either for big producers with like a high technology, traditional technology, but also like small farmers technology, smallholder technologies, which is part of what you saw in the video. So which kind of adaptation strategies to climate change we could identify it already on the ground, and also propose new one. So this was part of this project of 5 years. The second project that was about flood in this vulnerable community, in this like low income community in these 4 biomes in Brazil. This was founded by the climate change program of the Ministry of Environment in Brazil, in cooperation with the Ministry of Research. And the program that they were developing was about how vulnerable communities can better adapt to climate change. This was also 10 years ago. It's not in the frame of the policy of the current government, but this was one of the big lines of action from the environmental policy 10 years ago. So this was done during 2 years. This was much more shorter, much more intense in terms of collecting data and so on. They've done only with national institutions. The third project is a cooperation between the Ministry of Environment in France, but he gave the fund for a private company called Ecoclimasol, which did this packet of research only for one specific issue, which is how the wine sector can be better adapted to the scenarios of climate change. So this was also very strategically, was also economically very strategic, of course, because of the impact that change in climate and weather in these regions where big producers of wine like Mendoza in Argentina and Bordeaux in France need to do. So this is also very interesting if you want to get more information on climate change. And winery sector is one of the most developed in terms of development of adaptation strategies, of recreation of microclimate or changing of areas, because there will be a huge impact, economic impact on wine production. And the third, or the project 4 is called Scale Land, and this was, as I said, founded by the Ministry of Agriculture and Nutrition Security in Germany, and this was for 3 years. Even though especially in our group, this I have to say, it comes already for other projects. So there was a previous project that was in similar areas, not in the same village, but in the similar areas, in the semi-humid and the arid areas, where it was 5 years. Then we had this other project 3 years, and currently we have another project, which is again 3 years. But I would say that in general, research projects has 3 to 5, yeah, sometimes 2, but it's quite short time, 2 years, to really measure all, do the integration and so on. Okay, any other question?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I will then continue now. Can see probably, right, the screen. Okay.
Yes.
So, no? Yes? Yes, thank you. So we have saw all these cases, and now we go specifically to understand the methods, like which methods exist, part of, because there is a lot of methods, and nowadays, even more with more technology, we have more possibilities to process the data differently, and this is something very important. I'm not sure, but I think last year there was, I don't know if there is still the methodology course. I really recommend that you also take, where you can get the entire semester also surfing on the different methods that you can use for your research. I also recommend that you take advantage of all the license that you can have or access as a student, because after this is normally you have to buy the softwares for treat the data, for example. So if you can research and get more information on it, it's a very useful time that you have as a master's student, because you have all this license free. Good, so methods. First, before to decide the method, it's important that you go and understanding what is the basic structure to do a research in perception or social representation, as we have seen on the cases. So first is understand this context of research as I present. Where are this? Where is the place that you want to study? Do a determination of the borders of your study. If it's at the municipal level, if it's a community level, it's a village level. Community level is more or less the same. Or if it's even bigger, but then how much as a country level, as saw one example. But then determine it very clearly what are the borders of the territory that you are studying or researching, and understand then what are the social context, the social organization, the characteristics of this territory. Then what are the central elements that you want to research? So if it's about climate change or if it's about food security, examples that we saw, sometimes you have, of course, a cross of objectives. You can have, as we have projects in Colombia, where integrate climate change mitigation, not adaptation escape, but climate change mitigations with a clear focus in reforestation. And we combine with, for example, peace building, because it's one of the topics of development that we have in this territory. So center and what are the objective that you will focus. And sometimes 1 and 2 can change. You can first think about the central elements of your research and then go for the location, of course. But first decide this 2-1, and then once has decided what are the central elements, what your research question. You see this also is important for your term paper sometimes, but especially for your master thesis. Understand what is the question. You want to know what are the perceptions about climate change and how it influences the adoption of certain strategy, or for example, the use of landers as we see before, or as you see the case of France, Argentina case, where you have to understand if the producers are observing change and how they pretend, or which kind of methods they will use to adapt it, or they will accept use to adapt from the proposal strategies of the government, for example. So have a research question very clearly. This will help you. Then having this, you decide the methods. So that's where we want to see now which kind of methods. So it can be qualitative, quantitative, and also the population. So how percentage of the entire population, the sample that you will use. Then, which is very important, many students skip this part, which method do you use to process the results, especially in qualitative research, because in quantitative research, you have more naturally the tendencies to put this in number and percentage, it's quantitative, or you have already from the beginning the packet of the method which you already proposed the result processing with some specifically software. But in qualitative research, is very important that you treat well. It's not only description or what you observe, but you have a method, a very clear method to process the results. And finally, for the discussions, also, of course, link with of similar case, so you can go further as in the creation of knowledge. So this is the basic structure. Okay, I already explained specifically what you have as a basic structure. Why this population? Why this context? The same for the research issue. It's the statement of problem. Why this question? This question is improved. What from specifically this problem that you are researching? Then you have the method. I will present you here like this 5 types of interaction, very classic one. There is other ones, as I already presented, for example, theater of oppressor, which is I group here in focus group, but there is several methods. So structured interviews, they have the same series of questions we already have in Moodle. You ask once in Stefan lecture, you ask once, which is, if we have an example how the questionnaires work, and we have one already uploaded. It's from this Scalan project that I mentioned before when I was answering the question, which is about food security, and you see there that there is several questions with a specific answer. So here you have an option to answer. You don't have freedom to talk about it. So here it's closed questions. Normally here the interviewer plays a more neutral role because it's more a facilitator, a numerator. He will just collect. He will not have to ask or go or create questions, co-create a questionnaire during the interview according to the answers, because the answers are closer. They should be the same. Sometimes it even can be done online or with the surveys that you receive by email. So you have already there ready answers and defined answers. This is for a structured interview. When used, when you already have very clear, specific information that you want, so you have a clear focus that is already that can be understood later on with other methods, but you already want to know if people believe or not, is much more defined and structured. As normally you can have this a complementary method either in the beginning, if you already know specifically the topic, or also after. In general, I see more the structure where the qualitative data come first, because then you can get a lot of topics, understand more the context, have a more open structure, so you can also be open to see things that you do not imagine, because when you have a closed questionnaire or a structured interview, you have your own answers, right? You give your answers to the interviewer. So in general is more indicated for when you already know very well the context and want to specific questions. For example, the questionnaire you see there is how many times in the day you eat. So you have option 1, 2, 3, or something like this. Then you have a little bit more soft structure, which is semi-structured interviews, which works more like a guide. It's when you have the same questions, but the answer is open. So here you have normally to record, because there is a variety of answers. There is a lot of topics that can go out, can come out of this interaction. What is important here also is that it's formal and it's the same question, so that's why you can compare. You don't have the next example, as I will say. So the interviewer here follows a guide and do not create new questions during the process, but let free for the interviewer answer as he or she wants. When to use it? Normally, it's one of the key authors here for qualitative data. Normally, structured interviews are from qualitative data. He indicates that semi-structured interviews are important also if you don't have a chance to get more information on or to sit again with this interview, because here is the key that you can get other insights that are not planned. So normally they are also important that they are precede from observation, for meetings that you can follow, for participant observation that I do not mention here as a method, but is another method that normally I recommend also for master students, it's to be on the local that you research for some days and follow the meetings of this topic that you are researching, that you can just there participant observation, that's what you mean. You are participating and observing as a method to get more information, to construct a better guide of better questions that you use in your semi-structured interview. You talk with local leaders, you talk with director of NGO, for example, and it will be one chance that you have to talk. So it's important that you have a structure, but let it open also to understand more things that you didn't know before. Yeah, it's very important. I would talk about the training that you also have to do before to go to the field is also very important. I'm pretty sure that I think most of you have some experience or maybe are already professional in doing this, but it's very important that you prepare yourself very well to not only to be completely familiar and that the questions are very organic, because then you can also pay attention on the interviewer and not on the questionnaire. We go. So another possibility is unstructured interviews. That's what you saw in the video more or less, but very shortly, because there in the video you see just some parts of this unstructured interview, which we don't almost consider on the research, but we did anyway to get more familiar with the region and also to get this image. So here it's open question and open end, or open answer, open question, open answer. And here what you see is that here you see is that you have a question, you have a topic in your mind, but you don't have a clear question that you want. So you start freely to talk about this, and the questions come in the interaction in the time that you are interviewing. So here it's open question and open question and open answer. You only have the focus or the goal of your interview. You don't have a specific topics or the questions. So it's also some ethnography methods also classify the ethnographic excursions as unstructured interviews, when we are living with the community and are generating and every day taking different insights and creating questions when you are living there. But ethnography is another area full of methods which you also can apply, especially when you are studying remote communities, for example, that you really can live with them, and classify this as a method. Yeah, so when to use it? When you have a clear focus in ethnography process, for example, that you are living there a long time and capturing this reality along the way of the instance that, or the time that you're having in the community, or when you don't know about the topic specifically. For example, as I said before, you are still deciding the research context, the borders, the specific questions. They are specific research questions, so you go there and you start to investigate more as an exploratory phase. So this is also one way that you can use in structured interview. You also can combine unstructured interviews and participatory observation. So you go to a meeting in a community, for example, and you are there hearing what they are discussing and just having your participant observation. But eventually you can have some, eventually you also can have some, create some questions during this time. So you also can, you saw that you have a coffee break with someone and you have opportunity to do some questions, so you formulate your structured interview in the same meeting where you did participant observation. Then you have focus group. So all that I said until now as an interview is one-to-one person, right? Like it's face-to-face interaction. Normally, you can nowadays you can do all online. So you can also do online, of course, but in general, it's always important to be in a set where you can clearly observe also no answers, which are answers like silence, doubt, and so on. So better at least that you have video if you, but eventually you cannot. So the characteristics of focus group is when you have a collective discussion. So it's when some people call collective interview, which I do not adopt. There is people that use this and publish with this term, but interviews is for many authors defined as a face-to-face individual interaction. I'm sorry, I need to just check something here. Okay, so for the case of the focus group, you have then a group where you can put and focus your research question or your topic of research. Here is important to know that focus group per se can be considered a method, but the focus group as a method need a method too. So, for example, the focus group or the workshops that I show you as an example before is using the theater of oppressor as a method, because you can have an open discussion and just put the questions and people answer, but of course in those sets there is a lot of different segmentations or stratifications. So you have here power relationships when normally the leaders will talk and you don't have a possibility to get the entire information as you want of the entire group. So you in the end you capture the information much more from the people that have more power on the group. So it's important that you have a method that mediate the process regarding to collect the information for everybody, from everybody. When to use focus group, this is very open. I put just here some of the possibilities, but focus group is largely used because also is the way that you can capture more number of peoples, and this is normally for research. The sample number is very important. So you have when you need to talk with many people also, and you don't have a possibility to do interview face to face, this is one of the possibility. Also, when you want to just explore some topics that you can let people talk freely, this is also one possibility. Also, when you want to have also understand collectively how people interact and the community and the power relationships. So this is like a meta objective. Normally you bring the questions and observe who talks more. So you already identified, sometimes you don't know who are the leaders on the group that you're investigating, and in a focus group you also can better identify what are the power structures. Of course you don't bring this, but it's like a objective that you can bring in your research. Yeah, as I said before, it's very important, the practice, that is very important that you are very familiar. I had already quite of experience of hearing researchers, like students and people that feel that they were not familiar enough with the questions, especially if you have a questionnaire with 20, 30 questions. It's hard to memorize all, but it's very important for you that you are not there robotic, just reading the questionnaire, especially with semi-structured or unstructured interviews, of course, but then with some structured interviews, specifically the case where you have the questions, it's important that you know them, or most of them, that you can concentrate in what the interview is communicating for you, is communicating to you, including the silence, the doubts, and this issues of power relation or gender issues. If women say less or more than men in community, all the sensibility of research that you have to capture in this interaction. Yeah, so record normally is crucial because you can also come back and explore those things that you could not be able to capture in the interaction. Also the authorization, very crucial also for your if you work with this in your master thesis, it's very important it's very important to follow all the ethical procedures. There is different kind of ethical procedures that you can decide. There is thinking constitution for standards of research, but many universities has their own rules and their own ethical committee that you have to pass to prove that you are doing approved research on the field. So, okay. You have also to have the methods to elaborate the results. As I already mentioned before, you can have specific theoretical links. This is a specific article where I wanted to work with you, where you have from the beginning, for example, I show you the dragons of inaction. So here you have a specific link where you already want to identify. So you already have a pre-discussion done with the results, and you will just frame them in a theoretical perspective. You can have a frame perspective of the extraterritorialism, or a frame perspective of the constructivism, as I show for the social learning process. So you link to a specific theory, but you also, before this, you need to treat well your results. And for qualitative data, it can be very tricky. I really recommend you the MaxQDA. I don't know if you know about this software. There you can put the interviews, the transcription of the interviews, and you can identify keyword, associate them, understand how many times it appears, if the person is repeating all the time climate change, or no climate change, or doesn't exist climate change doesn't exist, or something like this. So you can understand how strong is the statement that the person is doing along all the interview. This is one possibility, but there is several tools that you can use to better understand your data, your qualitative data, especially on MaxQDA. I will try to see if I have the video here of the MaxQDA. And here. Sure.
Analyzing data can quickly turn into research, especially analyzing data, can quickly turn into chaos. Books, interview transcripts, field notes, literature reviews. You can easily get lost in it all. There must be an easier way. MaxQDA is a world-leading software for qualitative and mixed methods research. MaxQDA helps you collect, organize, analyze, visualize, and publish your data. And it can handle more file types than you might think. MaxQDA supports you throughout your research journey. Remember how it all began. As a child, you learned how to make sense of the world. You were an explorer from the very beginning, and you'll keep exploring your entire life. And when it's time to build a career, MaxQDA is there to help. It's an all-in-one software for every kind of data, and MaxQDA lets you analyze it all quickly and easily. Then take it with you through every stage of your career.
When we first released MaxQDA in 1989, we were pioneers in the field of computer-assisted qualitative data analysis. It was and still is a software developed by researchers for researchers. Today, MaxQDA is the most comprehensive QDA program in the industry.
One of MaxQDA's greatest advantages is accessibility. It's powerful, but it's also incredibly easy to use, and it operates in any language. What's more, it's the only leading QDA software which is identical on Windows and Mac. So you can share your data, work in teams, or teach qualitative research courses, no matter the platform.
MaxQDA is used by thousands of research teams in the academic, public, and private sectors all over the world.
So no matter your methodology, no matter your discipline, with MaxQDA, you can manage it all. Research is a journey. Travel it well. MaxQDA, the art of data analysis.
Okay, I think you could have a little bit of advertise of software. It was created here in Berlin. I think it's very useful, and you saw many images of Humboldt University, and it's highly used here for the students. So, having said that, you also have these possibilities to do with MaxQDA or with your own other method, do mental maps, for example, social representation maps. You can, of course, do more traditional evaluation for quantitative data where you use Likert Scala and can have then points to evaluate how people evaluate a determined adaptation strategy. For example, we use this also for one of the researchers. So now we go for the exercise. We have maximum 55 minutes, but considering that it's important, at least some of you, now we're gonna do this individually. Normally on the lecture, we can do this in groups and present there, but I will today do individually. And the idea is that you develop your own research structure regarding one environmental policy that you have in mind that you thought already previously from the other lecture, or if you wanted to just get some new one now, you can of course get some new one. So the exercise now is that you identified environmental policy. For example, we have the example at the beginning of the lecture with transborder of ocean, for example, this in Uniqlo, that come from Uniqlo. So how if you had to develop a policy or better implement a policy, which kind of research question you would have to better implement this policy or program, you can decide or plan if you have a specific in your mind. Then how you're going to do a research to capture better the views and the knowledge of the people that are involved in this policy implementation, and with which methods. Those are the tasks that you have to do, and we will come back that you present this, and also you probably will have more questions than to bring, and if you have using the application of the things that were explained until now. Do you have questions? Okay, so if you don't have questions, I give you now 15 minutes to decide the policy, problematic related to this, which actors you wanted to interact or integrate and the better development, and with which methods you will capture this and integrate. If you have new methods also to bring, you also can present new methods.
You said 15 minutes? Yes?
Yeah, 15 minutes, yeah. Hello, everybody. Do you need more time, or everybody have it finished?
I'm fine.
Great. Great. Okay. So we can start that you show a little bit your example, the results of your exercise. Who would like to start? We have 12 today, so it's not.
I can start.
I would ask that more or less we have between 2-3 minutes for the presentation, and then everybody can present them.
Okay, I can go first, I guess. Wait, I'll start my video as well so you can see me. Hi.
Thank you, Robert.
So the policy that I looked at was low emission zones in like urban areas. So in Germany, it's pretty popular to like say, okay, cars that are like